down to the Daily Dodge TV studios with Terry Bell for today's community comment.
Thank you so much, Jake, and welcome to another edition of Community Comment. Our guest today is State Representative Mark Bourne. If you have a question or a comment from Mark, of course, we invite you to join the program. You can call us or text us at 920-887-8585, or you can call our studio line at 885-4446. Mark Bourne, good morning. Welcome to Community Comments.
Good morning. Good to be here. Glad to slide in on those slushy streets today.
Boy, I tell you, it's tricky out there.
It's amazing. It's only a couple inches of snow. It's not like it was even a big storm, and it just makes such a sloppy mess.
It does, and Kara Foster explained it on the morning show, but it's the wet snow hitting the cold ground. It creates a special kind of be careful out there. Yeah.
We made her in, so good to be here.
Yeah, right. It's good to have you here. You were busy this week, of course, as you always are, but there was a floor session this week. Took care of a number of bills, including one in particular that I know of. Maybe there are more that you authored and helped champion.
Yeah, there was a few things that I worked on that came up this week. And, busy week in the legislature. Going to be busy next couple of months. Now back in what we call the spring session for some reason, even though it's in January, February, and sometimes March, which is really still very much winter.
For sure.
I don't know where these names come from over the years, but in the spring session of the legislature here in 2026. And yeah, we had, yesterday some tax cuts, which of course I'm always a fan of. Haven't met a bad tax cut yet, trying to get some money back to folks. We know we've been through several years now of some high inflationary costs. Things are getting better. I saw egg prices are a lot better. Beef prices are starting to come down a little bit, still really high. Gas prices are better. Some things are getting better, but we know there's still a lot of pressure on those household budgets and business budgets and things. So passed no tax on tips yesterday. This is something that they did also on the federal level, and we really matched that with that bill. And then another bill on no tax on overtime, similar also to the federal action that was taken there. So both of those apply to the 2025 tax year, so the tax that people are filing probably right now or in the next 2 months here. So hopefully that'll help, get a little bit more cash into folks' pocket and help with some family budgets and stuff. And then on Tuesday we were focused a little bit more on some public safety and children's safety and things like that. And I think the biggest one, and I know you guys covered this too in the news, I think on Wednesday, was a grooming bill.
Right.
And so thanks for the coverage on that, because I think it's important that folks know that we're working on this kind of stuff, because that got a lot of attention, was that maybe 6-8 months ago, when there was some concerns about how the Department of Public Instruction was handling teachers that were being accused of either assault or grooming or just improper relationships with students and things, and whether or not they were properly going after those licenses, and these things were being properly investigated. And one of the things we heard from Superintendent Underly then was that, Wisconsin statutes were clear when there was actual assault, but this grooming stuff wasn't really part of the statute. And so we wanted to get after that, because that was a concern. And when you have these adults especially in a position of power over a young person, we don't want any adults assaulting or doing any harm to any kids, period. But when they're in those respected positions of powers like teachers are and stuff, this grooming stuff gets really serious and really scary for these victims. And so to define that better in state law, make it clear that it's a criminal act, we think will both help empower DPI to do a better job of the investigations and the overseeing of these concerns in the future, but also make sure that it's a criminal act, that people are charged and properly so, and do whatever the proper findings of the court are as far as the punishment, because all of this stuff from outright assaults to the grooming to human trafficking and things of that are just something that seems to be, I don't know if it's just getting more attention and more knowledge, or if it's getting worse, but there's just so much of it out there. We've done a lot on human trafficking in the last few sessions of the legislature, But I think this grooming thing was a really important step in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one, it seems like it was bringing clarity. I think it was just an oversight, like an unintended consequence of whatever law existed. Um, and also, I would think that maybe a bad actor might think twice now if they did not think that they were running afoul of the law before. They ought to know that now.
One would hope, and sometimes that's enough of a deterrent too, is drawing some attention to it too, or getting people just thinking about it, and maybe even some of it is just getting regular folks and family members in the community thinking about it a little bit, so they're maybe keeping a little bit more of an eye on it.
Yeah.
Why is my son or daughter or granddaughter or whatever the case might be, what's going on there? Why are they spending so much time with that person? Who is that person? And that's not meant to say either that there aren't, great community members, great teachers, great coaches that are having really important roles in young people's lives along with their family and stuff. And, all of that's good, well and good and fine. I can certainly think about, it's getting to be a long time ago now, but coaches and teachers and stuff that had, a important role in my life. They were not doing anything inappropriate. They were not doing this, statutory definition of grooming in any way. But there are, unfortunately, clearly bad actors out there, just as there are in almost any industry, and we wanted to make sure we tighten that up. I think there were people that were debating that this stuff was already covered in statute or could be covered in statute, but some of that was more into interpretations by law enforcement or district attorneys about whether or not to charge it or whether or not it was rightly applied. So I think it's great that we clarified this. Hopefully we'll strengthen the investigations.
Mark Bourne about things happening in the legislature that affect us back here at the district. We need to take a break right here, but we will be right back. You're listening to Community Comment on 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge.
If dinner at your
Apologies for the technical difficulties. We should be all good to go now, so we will send it down to the Daily Dodge TV studios with Terry Bell for today's community comment.
Thank you so much, Jake Hayes. And as Jake mentioned, I'm Terry Bell. We're here with Mark Bourne today, and hopefully you can hear us loud and clear now. We also want to hear from you loud and clear. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can join the call or text line at 920-887-8585, or you can call the studio line at 885-4446. Well, no rest for the weary. We've got another floor session coming up next week after you had, 2 this week?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll be in twice again next week, and we're going to be taking up the data center regulation bill, which hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more about that on the show today, because that's obviously a big deal in this area, and so that'll be coming up, I think, on Tuesday. We're going to be also taking up several bills that deal with regulating foreign, I'm forgetting the term right now, like China, Iran. There's a State Department list of foreign adversaries. That's the term. And there's a lot of concern. This is something I hear from constituents in the area, especially when it comes to like farmland and things like that. They don't want to see foreign adversaries like China buying up land and things like that. And so there's several bills. One of them is protecting purchases of land from foreign adversaries. There's also some things on like technology and things like that. We don't want them tapping into our electric grid and water supply and things like that. And so there's some regulations on businesses about who they're working with. There's also some stuff on the university system as far as research. Doesn't mean that they can't do research as a blanket thing, but if they're going to do research like with a Chinese university or something like that, they got to at least run it through a federal agency to kind of check to make sure that we're protecting our country, our assets, our public safety, things like that. So a number of bills along those lines coming up next week. And then there's one that I'm one of the co-sponsors on protecting a little bit of another layer of protection for our corrections officers here in Wisconsin. It's already a felony to intentionally disarm a police officer, and we're going to add corrections officers to that statute to strengthen that charge a little bit and provide another layer of protection to what for many years now I've been talking about being an important part of our public safety system that sometimes is kind of overlooked or forgotten about. Obviously, our sheriffs and police and everything is great and super important, but corrections officers are an important part of that as well.
Absolutely. I want to talk more about the data center bill in a bit, but I also just wanted to follow up on the foreign adversary land purchase bill. What is the concern that somebody, a business person from a foreign country, a foreign adversary, would do if they bought up enough land in Wisconsin?
Yeah, I mean, it could go to a lot of different levels, and it's kind of the same thing with the data centers, of why companies are building more of that infrastructure in the U.S. is because then you don't have to rely on or worry about someone being able to take away that kind of control. And so if China starts collecting a lot of farmland and decides that they want to try to control the market in some way, and we aren't able to produce enough stuff locally anymore, that would become a huge problem, right? We can't feed our country and feed other countries anymore like we do. And that may sound kind of out there, but there's a lot of money involved here in a global economy, and China is becoming, they are a major player in the global economy. They have a lot of resources. They own a lot of debt already in this country. And so we want to make sure that they're not controlling things in this state in particular, because that's what my concern is. But other states are looking at the same thing, and the federal government's looking at similar things to make sure that they don't start being able to control our food supply, our electric grid, our water, things that are completely necessary to sustain life. And so I think it's important. I don't think that we're necessarily at great risk tomorrow on this, but this kind of stuff builds, and so we need to put the systems in place to make sure that we're protecting our state and ultimately our nation.
The data center bill, as I understand it, or maybe there's more bills. There's one or a package.
Yeah, the one that we had a press conference on Monday in Beaver Dam,
Exactly.
and I know you guys covered on later in the day and on Tuesday. Yeah.
And that's about protecting consumers. One of the concerns that we hear most consistently is concerned about utility bills going up because of the demand that the data center will create.
Yeah, there's that's one, and then the other one is always the water or the water quality. And so there's been so many rumors, social media things. A lot of them aren't based on fact, but when there's a lack of information or just an unknown, or there's something new and big coming in, people have a lot of questions and concerns, and that's perfectly legitimate. And so as we've been hearing more about protecting their electric bills for ratepayers and more about water and water quality, we just decided, hey, let's make sure these protections are in place. And so the two key parts of the bill, I think, are those two areas. It would require the Public Service Commission, when they approve those plans, which is something they have to do under current law, to make sure that the developer of the data center is paying for their electric costs. They're paying for the capital costs, the things that are needed to bring that in. I mean, they're obviously going to pay for the rates afterwards, but we want to make sure that they're not passing on the system that builds up to that on to other ratepayers. And so that's a key provision. And then the other part is on the water side, requiring closed loop systems, or I think there's going to be an amendment that tweaks it, or other water saving systems, because we don't want to limit future technology, right? When they started building these things, they weren't using closed loop systems because they didn't have the technology. Now they're pretty much all building them that way because they don't want to have to pay for more water than any other consumer wants to, right? So the industry is already making it more efficient, and so we want to capture that and make sure that we hold that in place. And then we want to report it, like make it transparent. So annually they will have to report out of these data centers in Wisconsin under this bill how much water they're using, so people can see how much they're using. They know exactly how it is impacting or not impacting the water supply in the area. And so I think those are really two important parts. There's a few other things about protecting the land and the local governments a little bit on these deals in case the groups try to back out of them and things like that, which is also good. But water and electricity costs are the two things I've heard about the most, and this bill's addressing it head on.
Certainly. In general, I guess, what is the pulse you're taking as far as how it's going out there at the data center, any communications you've had with Meta, and just support and concern in the community?
Yeah, I haven't, other than going to the big announcement that you were also at, covering the event whenever that was, last fall or something here in Beaver Dam. That's the only time I've met any of the Meta folks. I saw their person speak at some chamber events and things like that afterwards. But I think that, for one, the community has been able to learn a lot in the few months now that they've announced who's doing the project and how the project will be and what kind of water use there actually is. It's nowhere near what was rumored to be. Things like that, I think, are helping a lot. People are understanding that this is a significant economic development for the area, and not maybe what folks thought it was in the beginning in some ways. I think there still are folks that are concerned. I think that continuing to talk through these issues, legislation like this can help with that. But I think the biggest thing I hear now is just it's such a huge construction project that it's just a really difficult for that area, and it's going to be. There isn't any way to help that, right? When you're doing that major of a construction project, bringing in hundreds and at times a couple of thousand of construction workers to work on different parts of it, the traffic's going to be bad. There's lots of dump trucks. There's lots of work going on. They're adding lanes to the streets. They're running water out there now down W and stuff. And so it's messy and certainly very inconvenient for folks that live out there. And that's obviously unfortunate, but progress like that is just, if you're going to have a big construction project, new road project, whatever, it is what it is. And but that's probably what I've been hearing about more in the last at least few weeks, is just how kind of difficult it is to navigate through some of that out in that area.
Certainly. We're talking to State Representative Mark Bourne on Community Comment. We need to take a break for the news, but we'll be right back. You're listening to Community Comment on 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge.
action here for Community Comment in the Daily Dodge TV studios. Here's Terry Bell.
Thank you very much, Jake Hayes. We're talking to State Representative Mark Bourne on this edition of Community Comment. We invite you to be a part of the conversation. You can call us or text us at 920-887-8585, or you can call our studio line at 885-4446. The state of Wisconsin, the legislature just got some news that should be encouraging, and that's the state budget surplus, projected anyway, appears to be bigger than we thought even a few days ago.
Yeah, it's been a big week for that. Earlier in the week, the governor was pointing out his priorities. He was talking about a $4 billion surplus. While we're certainly in a good financial position, our surplus is not that big. That was the surplus at the end of the last budget, which was last June 30th. We're operating now in the new 2-year budget. And we invested a lot of that surplus at that point into the priorities in this budget, education, tax relief, roads, things like that. So at the beginning of the week, we were sitting at about a $900 million surplus, which is a lot of money. But in the big picture of the state budget, the biennial GPR, general fund supported state budget is in the upper 40 billions, like 47, 48 billion dollars. So 900 million is a 2% or so of that, kind of to keep a general fund. But at the every even numbered year, so we're in 2026 now, and in January we always get an update from our nonpartisan fiscal bureau. They take a look at how tax collection has been in the first 6 months of this 2-year budget that we're in. They take a look at like national trends and economic trends and things like that, and they make adjustments to what they've predicted for our revenue in this 2-year budget. And they are projecting an additional, I think it was $1.4 billion in tax collections, higher than what so that's not the total, that's how much the increase is over what we predicted when we built our budget that we're operating under now. And so with that, as well as a few other things, it's going to take the surplus, because there's a few other things that impact it positively and negatively. Like there's some agencies that are spending a little bit more right now, there's some that are spending a little bit less, so they do an analysis of all that, but they are projecting now that our surplus will be about $2.4 billion. So certainly not as high as the governor was talking about from last budget, but significant. It shows, I feel like I should say thank you to the businesses in Wisconsin, our real economic drivers. Obviously, we try to do things in the legislature since I've been there to be, a good state to do business, regulatory-wise and tax policy-wise and things like that. And so it's good that partnership's been working and that our private sector folks have been continuing to drive this economy. We're seeing really strong collections from corporate taxes, from individual income taxes. And so that's good for the state budget and the state fiscal position. And it means that besides the things that are already scheduled to come up next week, we're going to be working over the next few weeks for that February session on where to make the key investments with some of that money. Certainly need to keep some in reserve like we were, but not that much. We want to get some of this back out, and some of it will build off of the tax relief that I talked about in the first segment. But I think we're going to focus a lot in February with this surplus on affordability and getting more money into the hands of individuals here in Wisconsin so that they can afford some of these inflationary things that are impacting their businesses and their family budgets. And so it's good to be in a position to do that. It's good that, more than a decade now of Republican-controlled legislature building the budget has got the state in really a sound financial picture. And hopefully we'll be able to do some things in February that'll help folks here in Wisconsin manage their finances a little bit better in the coming years.
I'm anticipating the latest edition of the age-old debate when these budget surpluses happen is, the debate between addressing wants and needs in the state as opposed to returning the money to the taxpayers.
My hope, personally, and I think for a lot of my caucus members, we're going to spend the next couple of weeks trying to figure out how to have a good impact on property taxes with a lot of that money. Property taxes are way too high. We talked about that last month when I was on the show. That's something that I heard about a lot over the holidays when folks got their bills in late November and early December. And so I think you're going to see, at least from the Republican Assembly side, taking a big chunk of that surplus and finding a way to have an impact. And it's not easy. We talked about that last time I was on, because it's the local governments that do all that taxing, and then we're always trying to, from a state level, to relieve some of that pressure. But I think we're taking a look at now. We've been talking already for the last couple of days, because I expected last week already that revenues were going to be up. I didn't think they'd be up that high. I was a little bit surprised when I met with Director Lang yesterday from our fiscal bureau. I knew the economy was still strong. We were seeing some good things in monthly tax collections and stuff, but very strong. And so that's great for the state budget, and hopefully we can do some things to make it better and provide some property tax relief.
What accounts for the increased surplus? What's going on when you end up 6 months after the budget's passed with more money than you thought you'd have?
Yeah, it's mostly just this economic growth. You're seeing, looking at even the state and national trends, wages are up, productivity or sales, depending on the industry, is up. Sales tax collection was only up a little bit, so they didn't adjust that. But there's indicators that there's more investments going into the service industries right now, which we don't collect sales tax on in Wisconsin. But that meant, that people were using more, financial planners, banking, things like that. Maybe even things like going to the beauty salon and stuff like that. That doesn't all impact the same way, but everything was pretty positive, and the national trends were pretty positive. I think there's always still, if you look at the different national groups that are doing their predictions, all of them now kind of have an asterisk of, depending on what happens with the tariffs in what direction. They're all a little bit sure on trying to figure out how to predict on some of that. But the economy is strong, and part of what's driving that, and that was certainly noted in the national trends, is all these investments in AI. All the major companies, including the ones that are playing here in Wisconsin right now, like Google and Meta, are doing a lot of new construction, a lot of expansion in that area, and that's why that's one of the key economic drivers right now. And that's why it's good that Wisconsin is participating in that as well as other states, because we don't want to just see all that growth in other places. And all of that stuff is having an impact on our state budget and state collections.
In addition to the taxing and spending discussion, there's also the need to maintain an adequate rainy day fund. And how much is enough? How much is too much? How much is inadequate?
Yeah, that's always the question, but we have the best rainy day fund in Wisconsin history right now, and it's always debatable whether that's enough or not, but it's over $2 billion. It's about 8% of our general fund or of our general budget right now, and so I think that that's why when I mentioned we were holding about $900 million before, which is a lot of money, maybe people thought we were holding too much, but that's why I mentioned that was maybe about 2%. Because you want to be able to show that you have reserves in case there's a problem. And so I think between holding a little bit in that general fund, a little bit comparative to the billions, and having a solid rainy day fund, those are good things. And actually, now that I think about it, that $2 billion is about 8% of 1 year of spending. And I was saying that the $900 million was about 2% of our total 2-year budget. So 5% of 1 year of spending between those two accounts, or about 5% of 2 years of spending, or about 10% of 1 year of spending, depending on how you choose to look at it. But I think those are kind of good goals, but it could be debatable. Some folks think you should be holding 15 or 20% in reserve. Some folks think it's never really going to be raining, and just do what you want to do. And so
that sounds risky.
That's not where I would be, but there's the full spectrum of that debate. So I think that the 5% of the 2 year or 10% of the 1 year spending, I think is pretty reasonable. and that's about where we have been. And now we've got an additional surplus that we'll certainly spend some of that down, but I think we'll try to stay in that area and make sure that we're, continuing to manage funds properly, continuing to make investments in key areas that people expect. And I think the biggest focus for February is going to be trying to help with affordability and get some of that money back into the hands of the taxpayers.
Mark Bourne is our guest on Community Comment. We need to take another break, but we'll be right back. You're listening to 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge.
Studios, here's Terry Bell.
Thank you very much, Jake. Yes, just a few more minutes with State Representative Mark Bourne, but still plenty of time to join the conversation. If you'd like to call us or text us at 920-887-8585, or you can call us right here at the WBEV studio line at 885-4446. Governor Evers this week, I believe, launched what he's calling the Get Kids Ready 4K program. Yeah, that was Tuesday. And this is very similar to something that's near and dear to your heart that you've been working on too, and that's helping kids at that those 4-year-olds in Wisconsin, and address a lot of other needs in Wisconsin.
Yeah, this is a great program, and he's got his name for it. I think I would call it Universal 4K, but whatever you choose to call it, a great program that does some really important stuff. And Some of the early ideas for this program started at a coffee shop right here in Beaver Dam. I talked about this a few months ago on Community Comment that my staff and I met with some owners of some daycares from the Dodge County area, Iron Ridge, Juneau, Beaver Dam, and we're talking about how one of the things that was really destroying their business model over the last decade or so was so many of these 4-year-olds leaving the daycares and going into 4K programs at the school district. And they were losing those older daycare kids that were the ones that they making their business model work because they required less care and less oversight than the infants. And so we started, brainstorming there and working on different drafts of the bill that ultimately, several years later, ended up in negotiations with the governor on this budget and ended up becoming this program. And so it's, to me, a super great opportunity for 2 reasons. One is it's a school choice type of program where parents can decide what's best for their 4-year-old, and you can certainly enroll them in the 4K at the public schools or other participating schools and do great things. Or you can leave your child at your daycare if your daycare chooses to participate in this program, and they can get their same 4K school readiness type of education right there at that daycare where they've been probably since a baby. And so that helps them stay there for another year before they have to head into the school system in a place that they know and love and that the family loves and, is choosing to participate at. So that's a great thing. And then the second great thing, as I kind of mentioned, is it helps to stabilize that business model for the daycares. They've been struggling by losing those 4-year-olds. If they can keep those 4-year-olds, do the school readiness, get funded by the state for that, get funded by the families still for some daycare like they have been, and stabilize those budgets so those providers can be successful, that they can be there to do the essential part of our economy that they are, to provide daycare for families that need it for work. And so it's a good twofer, I guess. And it's something that, when we started talking about it years ago, we're excited about the idea. But just glad to see it starting up now, and hopefully it will be as successful as we thought it was when we were talking about it several years ago.
Very good. We have a caller joining the program. Caller on line 1, you're on Community Comment with State Representative Mark Bourne. Good morning, caller.
There we go. I tried to switch him over. You should be able to hear him now.
Are you there?
Yes, hello, good morning. Welcome
Hello?
to Community Comment. You're talking to State Representative Mark Bourne.
Are you there?
Yes, we're here.
Oh. If you could a little bit, could you talk a little bit about the Noel Nelson Stewardship Fund and then the future funding of that? Because I know there's been some discussion of funding of that going away.
Sure.
Very good. Mark?
Yeah. So, glad you brought that up. This is one of my favorite programs, and I think an important program. We just had a caucus discussion on it this week. I felt after the caucus discussion this week that we are in a good position and very close to a deal to do 2 more additional years of funding on it, and that's a great thing. There'll probably be some reforms to it, but I think that it will be a lot more focused on investing in habitat and trails and really building out more of what we have, and rather than maybe acquiring more state land. But been working with a lot of good groups like Ducks Unlimited and the Bear Hunters and Waterfowl Association and Trout Unlimited, and I shouldn't have started naming them because now I should name 30 of them instead of 4, but there's a great coalition. We've been working very closely with them. I've been in a lot of those meetings and those negotiations, as I have in the past. This program has been at risk a number of times since I've been in the legislature, under the previous governor and more than a decade ago when we negotiated some new deals to keep it alive. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to keep it going, and it's certainly something that I've been working a lot on. And I guess I don't know. The caller brought it up. They didn't say if they were for or against it, but hopefully it was something.
Yeah,
that,
caller, did you have a specific question for Mark?
They ended up dropping after they asked the question.
All right, very good.
So, but we're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and certainly we're running out of time in some ways. It's in the next couple of months we're gonna have to get the deal, but we had a good discussion this week. I think that the support for it, at least in our Assembly Republican caucus, is growing.
Okay, Very good. Before we go, we should probably talk about the $484 million that's going to wastewater infrastructure around Wisconsin, and importantly, here in our area.
Yeah, this is something that this programs have been around a while, and I know I heard you did a story on some of the local grants that were done, I think earlier this week or last week. But I think it's great to point it out because this is another area where the state's trying to help with affordability, and there's challenges. There's all this federal standards that like wastewater plants have to meet and things like that on their discharge that are very expensive. And ratepayers are getting hit hard with that. And so programs like this are trying to relieve some of that pressure. We can't relieve it all. But when I see grants, I think in this last round going out to Beaver Dam and Mayville and I think Iron Ridge, which isn't in my district anymore, but it's just a little ways away. And I know, going all the way back to when I was on the city council almost 20 years ago, Beaver Dam was getting this kind of grant for upgrades to the wastewater plant and stuff. So this is an important partnership that the state has to try to help with the escalating costs of trying to protect our resources and our environment. I mean, no one's suggesting that we should be discharging dirty water into our waterways, but we also are recognizing that this is super expensive to meet some of these federal standards on nitrates and things like that. And so this has been a good partnership that the state's been doing for some time. It's great to see some of those local grant awards and just trying to help with the affordability of maintaining these important utilities in our municipalities.
Very good. Well, the hour flew right by. State Representative Mark Bourne, thanks for joining us on Community Comments.
Always good to be here. We'll see you next month.
We'll see you next month, and we'll see you Monday, too, on Community Comment on 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge.
The college football